in the fevered twilight of the 19th century, as Europe teetered on the threshold of a new and terrible modernity, and artists in Munich painted visions that glowed like nightmares. Franz von Stuck was a man of myth and menace, a painter who seemed less to invent his images than to summon them from some subterranean depth beneath the waking world. He was hailed as one of the founders of the Munich Secession, admired by symbolists and aristocrats alike. But to those who looked longer, too long, into his paintings, there was something else, an atmosphere that trembled with prophecy. His figures of demons, gods, and spectral hunters were rendered not merely as allegories, but as living premonitions. Stuck painted not the past or mythic imagination, but the dreadful currents of a demonic future about to unfold across the planet. Franz von Stuck was born on February 23, 1863, in Tetten, Weiss, a small Bavarian village near Passau, Germany. The son of a miller, he showed a precocious talent for drawing from an early age. Drawing village life, animals, and mythic figures in his notebooks. His gift earned him admission to the Academy of Fine Arts in Munich, where he developed his distinctive blend of mythological and psychological symbolism. By his 20s, Stuck was already illustrating magazines and earning acclaim for his darkly imaginative prints. Works that reflected both the mystic romanticism of late 19th century Germany and his own fascination with the divine and the damned. During this time, the Munich Artists Association and the Royal Academy dominated the art world, favoring conservative, historical, and academic styles. But Stuck and his peers of young artists became frustrated with the rigid juries that rejected experimental or symbolist works. In response, they formed the Munich Secession in 1887 to promote artistic freedom and to exhibit art that reflected the modern spirit of the late 19th century psychological realism, symbolism, and mythic sensuality. It was after this that Stuck finally found the artistic freedom to paint his prophetic works. In the year 1889, Stuck painted The Guardian of Paradise, a beautiful yet ominous angel standing before a gate of light, his sword drawn, his expression unreadable. The feathers of his wings glimmer with metallic reflection. There is holiness here, but also menace. The angel's body faces the viewer, but his eyes look past, beyond, into something we cannot see. Stuck was obsessed with this duality, beauty as the herald of ruin, the guardian, ostensibly a protector of divine order, stands like a sentry, barring humanity from returning to Eden. His face is perfect but inhuman, an archetype of what the modern world would come to call the machine man. If one believes, as many do, that art anticipates the future, then Stuck's angel predicted the industrial and militarized deities that would rise from Germany in the decades ahead. The same blend of sacred authority and cold precision which he gave to this celestial figure would soon be mirrored in the uniforms and symbols of an empire intoxicated by destiny. Also painted in 1889. It is the wild hunt that chills the blood most profoundly, not only for its mythic fury, but for its prophetic horror. The painting shows a spectral horseman charging through a storm, his steed's mane aflame with motion. Around him swirl ghostly figures, riders of death, and the long wail of wind and wolves. The sky behind him is bruised with twilight, a premonition of the apocalypse. Stuck drew on Germanic legend, in which the wild huntsman is a spirit of the dead who rides to gather souls before catastrophe. But look closer at the rider's face. It is not the face of Odin or some ancient god. It is a distinctly modern face, pale, mustached, and narrow-eyed. When viewed in reproduction, it bears an eerie resemblance to a young Adolf Hitler. The unsettling truth is that Stuck painted The Wild Hunt in 1889, the very year Hitler was born. The coincidence seems almost cruel. The prophet of doom had already given the future its image before the child of ruin even drew breath. Was it chance? Or did Stuck, working in the fevered haze of myth and symbolism, glimpse the coming rider of death, the one who would unleash his own wild hunt across Europe? The resemblance is undeniable, the timing uncanny. To gaze upon the Wild Hunt is to feel that the 20th century was already galloping toward us long before it began. In 1890, Stuck painted one of his earliest triumphs, Lucifer. The angel sits in a void of emerald and shadow, muscles tense, eyes burning with a strange, cold light. He is not the defiant Lucifer of romanticism. He is the watchful one, poised, waiting, as if aware that his fall is not yet complete. Look closely at his face. It is not sorrowful nor angry. It is anticipatory. Scholars have noted that Stuck painted Lucifer during a time of personal isolation and rising social anxiety in Europe. Yet the eeriest detail is how contemporary the figure's expression feels. There is something distinctly 20th century in his stare, something coldly mechanical and calculating. In later years, Hitler would revere this painting. The future dictator reportedly owned a reproduction of it, and saw in Lucifer the image of defiant genius misunderstood by a corrupt world. Whether Hitler saw himself reflected there, or whether Stuck had, decades earlier, seen him in his imagination, is the riddle that haunts the canvas. If Lucifer is the herald of fall, the sin is its consummation. And this painting, perhaps Stuck's most famous, depicts a nude woman wrapped in a black serpent, her flesh glowing against the darkness. The woman's eyes, intoxicated, guilty, seem to follow the viewer. The serpent, its head poised near her breast, is not threatening her. It is possessing her. Art historians read the sin as an allegory of temptation and moral decay. But there is an unease that exceeds allegory. The woman is not Eve. She is civilization itself, radiant and doomed. Stuck's mastery of chiaroscuro, the use of strong contrasts between light and shadow, turns the background into an abyssal stage on which only corruption can gleam. When viewed under dim light, the snake's coils seem to shift subtly, giving the illusion that it's tightening its hold. Many of Stuck's contemporaries felt physically disturbed by the painting, as if it emanated an invisible force. One critic in 1894 described it as the look of a nightmare one has yet to dream. But the most disturbing observation is the woman's face. Framed in shadow, is curiously blank. She is not resisting. She is consenting to her own damnation, a theme that would become horrifyingly relevant to the century that followed. In 1894, Stuck created the painting War. In this work, Stuck abandoned subtlety for revelation. A horseman rides through a lurid sky, livid bodies on the ground, representing the horrors of conflict. The composition seethes with violence, yet its emotion is strangely cold. This is not the chaos of battle, but the ritual of it. War, in Stuck's world, is not madness. It is divinity fulfilled. Stuck's contemporaries thought it an allegory of human folly, but seen now, it feels like a manifesto for the century to come. There is a fascist beauty in its symmetry, an aestheticization of destruction that prefigures the visual rhetoric of the Third Reich. The marshes, the banners, the ceremonial cruelty. It's as if decades before war would turn the world to ash. Stuck already intuited that beauty could serve the abyss, and perhaps he loved it. Perhaps that was his curse. By the 1900s, Stuck was a celebrated figure in German art. Knighted in 1905 and revered as one of the founders of the Munich Secession. Yet, as modernism and abstraction began to dominate, his mythic, symbol-laden style fell out of fashion. He retreated into his opulent Villa Stuck in Munich, a mansion he designed as a temple to art, where he continued to paint and teach. Ill health and artistic isolation shadowed his final years, and on August 30th, 1928, he died in Munich at the age of 65. By then, the world he had once painted in mythic allegory was already sliding toward the nightmares he had so eerily foreseen. His art is full of gods and monsters, but the dividing line between them blurs. In his world, sin is beauty, power is holiness, and downfall gleams like gold. It is the very aesthetic logic that would seduce a nation. Standing before Stuck's works today, in the hushed halls of his villa, one can almost hear something beneath the paint, the low hum of prophecy, the sound of history breathing through pigment and myth. He did not paint political manifestos, he painted archetypes. But archetypes, when drawn too vividly, tend to step out of their frames. Lucifer's stare, the serpent's caress, the angel's cold guardianship. Each of these images, created between 1889 and 1894, predates the horrors of the century to come, but in them one feels the century's pulse already beating. It is as though Stuck reached through time, not as a seer, but as a conduit, channeling what Jung would later call the collective shadow of Europe. When the rise of the Third Reich arrived, Stuck was long dead, but his ghosts were not. The imagery of his mythic canvases lived on, in propaganda, in ritual, in the very spectacle of terror. His wild hunt had begun in earnest. To call Franz von Stuck a prophet of doom is not metaphor but recognition. He gave shape to forces that were not yet visible but already alive. His art, veiled in the language of myth, was the mirror through which the 20th century first caught sight of its reflection. He was both artist and oracle, one who saw Lucifer not as fallen angel but as the face of man himself. His canvases glow with the terrible beauty of foreknowledge. When you look into the wild hunt, into that rider's face hurtling through the storm, remember, the child he resembles was only hours old. Yet already Stuck had painted his arrival his purpose, and his legacy. Art, it seems, can sometimes see too far.